The world I live in is overflowing with countless dungeons. A cave-type dungeon was created, then a labyrinth-type dungeon was created. Another challenge tower-type dungeon was created. This is the vast world of dungeons, and along with the countless hidden treasures within them, there are adventurers who seek to conquer and claim all the great riches of this world. However, not everyone can become an adventurer. Only those who have been chosen can become one. There we can see our hero carrying a huge bag. It looks like a very full bag with a seal on top. He approaches a man who looks a bit suspicious. That man explains that to proceed into the dungeon, one needs a permit. But the next moment he gets curious about what that thing is. He's surprised to see a bag of that size. Then our hero thinks to himself that he has become the adventurer's bag. His name is Naji and he's a white rank porter. The adventurer seems a bit impatient with our hero. He asks how a porter can be later than the adventurers themselves, saying that kids these days are hopeless. Nagi feels a little embarrassed and apologizes, saying it's his first time in this area. The man asks why he's alone and where the other porters are. He adds that the Porters Association should have received an advance payment of 50 coins. Our hero gives a slight smile. Proudly, he says he is the porter that costs 50 gold coins per day. The adventurer seems skeptical and questions this information. Raising his voice, he asks if the boy thinks this is an easy task. Then he explains that this is a dungeon where at least 4 or 5 porters should have been sent and asks what he's planning. The man somewhat harshly asks if he thinks he can carry everything and also carry whatever they find throughout the dungeon. He finished it dramatically by asking if he could bear the weight of their lives. Finally, he asks if he understood and tells him to go back to the Porters Association and ask for reinforcements, or else he'll end up causing trouble with the association. Surprised, our hero says he's carrying enough for 4 people, but the man insists that, as he said, it's not possible for one person to carry all that. Naji thinks that reactions like this from adventurers are quite common, and that a porter charging 5 times the usual rate would still earn less than 10 coins. And he thinks that, in these cases, instead of giving a long explanation as he takes off his bag, he knows it's more effective to show them once and for all. So he throws that huge decorated bag onto the ground and starts picking up the adventurer's luggage and somehow begins to shove it all inside his bag. The adventurers look a bit surprised at the situation. One of them asks what that is, and they come to the conclusion that it's a magic bag, and our smiling hero explains that this is all he needs to carry everything. The adventurers ask where he got that thing and start asking if it's heady and that they'd like to have one too. A little embarrassed, the young man apologizes and says that this is a unique bag and others can't use it, then asks if they're going to hire him as their porter now. One of the adventurers tells him to stop making such a fuss and adds that even a porter with a magic bag isn't all that impressive. Then that man says he'll hire him as their porter. His name is Jeffnam. He's a gold-rank swordsman, and he's the leader of the Downed Wolf. But the man raises his fist and says there's a condition. He says that he'll have to earn that gold and that not working as hard as 5 porters will have consequences. Our hero wonders if this guy is really the leader of the adventurer party and realizes that he seems strict, so the leader tells him to grab their gear and prepare for the expedition. Excited, Nagi thinks everything is fine for him. After all, he's a professional porter. Feeling pumped, he believes something big will happen before the end of this dungeon. Then that group of adventurers continues on their way. They enter the dungeon, and our hero decides that he'll make sure everyone is satisfied before the end. The reason he earns much more than the others isn't just because of his skills as a porter. It's because of the overwhelming satisfaction of the adventurers he works with. They proceed through the dark interior of the dungeon, and adventurers who conquer dungeons face countless dangers. And at that moment, it looks like one of them is about to face one. Our hero thinks that traps could spring at any time, not to mention enemies that might ambush them. One of them starts moving forward, but the group of adventurers seems ready for combat. Their leader points at the creatures saying they're coming. A fierce battle breaks out across the area. Jeffnam faces his opponent with courage. Conquering a dungeon is full of countless variables, and that ends up bringing everyone considerable stress as a result. The leader asks if he told them not to let their guard down and questions if they're getting nervous. One of the men says he got scolded because of the other guy, and a small argument breaks out. While our hero thinks that's exactly why he became a porter specialized in this niche market, and he seems even more excited by the situation. Then he gets the adventurers' attention by reaching into his huge bag. He says they must be starving after working nonstop and adds that he brought them some snack. The men are stunned by what they're seeing, and they start drooling, wondering what it is. They're impressed by the smell too. They ask what it is and are shocked by all the food. Our hero has set up a massive feast using his secret porter skill, the dungeon restaurant. Without hesitation, the men start eating. They say it's something special and still warm like it was freshly made, while another man thanks God, saying even the salad is fresh. With tears in his eyes, one adventurer says he'd only been eating dried meat and bread as hard as stone. Surprised, they ask if the bag has the ability to keep food fresh, and they're even more shocked by the idea that it might actually cook it. Excited, our hero says it's something like that, thinking to himself that what really matters is, then he says out loud that they haven't seen anything yet. He seems to dip his hand in water. In the next moment, he starts filling something up. He just used his other secret porter skill. It's called Arcadian Paradise. That adventurer looks like he's in shock. He wonders if he's at a resort. Feels like he's in a hot spring in the middle of a snowy field. But when he opens his eyes, he realizes the scenery isn't exactly like that, and yet it still feels unbelievable. It seems someone in the group isn't too pleased. The leader shouts, asking if they're on vacation, then says that doing this in a dungeon is downright careless. He adds that it's too warm here to bother fighting with anyone, and his companion agrees. They conclude that there's no choice but to acknowledge this. He says he took a risk, but didn't believe all this would be worth 50 gold coins, and that he was even planning to request compensation from the guild for this. But considering the porter's abilities, 50 coins is a bargain. Our hero asks if this isn't what dungeon conquering is really about. He explains that outsiders might think the difficulty comes only from facing powerful monsters, but the environment and stress can cause failure too. He says failures from bad food or lack of sleep are common stories in this field. He explains that dungeon porters rely on adventurers and that to make money, adventurers need to complete dungeons. So he does everything he can to help and ensure that success, and he believes it's not such a big deal. That older adventurer looks surprised. He says that calling this not a big deal is almost cute and that they rarely get even a third of this treatment outside of a dungeon. In fact, he's never experienced it before. He says that after receiving all this care, he feels recharged and that he feels like he can handle any enemy waiting for them. So he tells our hero not to worry about the dungeon's conclusion. But Nadi seems a bit embarrassed asking about the man's clothes. Then moving forward, our hero thinks that conquering a dungeon is a smooth process. While another battle begins, he realizes that considering how skilled the group is, dealing with the monsters is easy. But the problem lies with the boss monster, as bosses always come with a bunch of unpredictable variables. Jeffnam uses a power on his sword and curses the boss, saying it's cunning. He orders the group not to give the creature any space and to keep pressuring it with attacks. The monster in turn roars and prepares to strike. It tries to hit one of the adventurers, who dodges skillfully. Then he counterattacks, firing bolts from his crossbow. He hits the creature's leg dead on using his spider web skill. The monster seems to feel the attack and charges at the adventurers, unleashing a powerful blow at them, but the group is alert and defends with their shield. The leader then prepares to strike it with his weapon. He uses a swordsman's skill called multiplication, slicing into the creature. The monster doesn't seem pleased and begins preparing a breath attack, but the group is ready for it. Jeffanon seems to sense the danger of the situation. Meanwhile, our hero simply observes the battle from a protected spot. He realizes that this time the boss is a B-rank monster, a Zark lizard. He thinks that judging by the adventurer's skills, the success rate is over 80%, but the 20% chance of failure can't be ignored. And the failure of the adventure party means the death of the porter, and that is not an option. So grabbing something from his bag, he thinks he has to help. He puts his hand inside, wondering what he should grab, and finally seems to find what he's looking for. He knows the group's attack power is enough, so creating a small opening might be enough to settle things. He feels a bit sad, thinking it's a waste to use such an expensive smoked mushroom. But completing the dungeon is the priority now, so he has no other choice. The problem is how to hit the creature, and the monster continues its assault. Then, at that moment, the creature charges at the group leader. Our hero believes that no matter how unpredictable the monster's attacks are, he can aim at the moment it goes after an adventurer. So he throws the mushroom at the monster. The creature just watches the object approaching. It hits squarely, releasing a thick cloud of smoke. The creature seems to feel the impact of the attack. The group leader yells out for the porter. Finally, our hero raises a flare and says that now is the moment. Jeffnon seems quite satisfied with the situation. Already rushing the creature, he says he got the message. He begins climbing up the monster's back while it is still in defensive state, preparing to deliver a powerful blow. The monster only seems to notice this at the last second. Then the group leader strikes the creature, finally bringing it down. He looks down at it with a satisfied expression. Then he tells everyone it was a great job and to grab the spoils. Naughty thinks the dungeon clear ended smoothly in the end, but that feeling of excitement only lasted for a brief moment. Because right after, the mood shifted, and the reason was that the rewards were really bad. He knows that for a B rank monster, there should have been at least 20 magic stones, but only 5 dropped and the rest was just trash. To make things worse, most of the dungeon was made up of common monsters like goblins. So in other words, comparing the cost and effort of conquering this dungeon to the reward, the result was a complete waste of time. And on top of that, they had to split those few rewards between the 4 of them. So our hero thinks that maybe because of that, the joy of clearing the dungeon vanished and the mood turned tense. And the party members start arguing over how to divide the reward. Even splitting that tiny reward becomes a bit delicate. But then excited again, they come to a conclusion that this is adventurer's business, and it doesn't concern him since the porter has a fixed payment and doesn't care how much they earn. He decides that before things get any worse, now is the moment to wrap everything up. And with 2 bottles in hand, he thanks the adventurers for their hard work and adds by asking if they must be thirsty, offering a drink. The group looks at our hero standing beside the defeated monster. The leader smiles and says he even takes care of the group's needs after the dungeon and mentions the smoke bomb he threw at the boss. He says that finding him in this dungeon might have been the biggest treasure they got, and our hero laughs, saying he's just flattering him today. And he adds that he only gave a little help with his modest skills. One of the adventurers questions the term modest skills, saying the more he sees, the more amazed he gets. He explains that Niji pulls endless wonders out of that bag, and maybe that bag holds more than the dungeon itself. Another asks if it could also contain piles of money. The older one adds that after all, he's the porter who charges 50 gold coins. And just like the captain said, the greatest treasure in this dungeon was finding this porter. Then the group starts to seem a bit suspicious. Our hero wonders why the mood seems to be taking such a weird turn. Then something hits the bottle of liquor straight on, shattering it. He turns around and sees it was a bolt from a crossbow that flew just past him. Shocked, he yells out asking what that was just as another bolt comes flying his way, but he manages to dodge it at the last second. Then our hero ends up falling to the ground and asks what the hell he's doing. That older adventurer says it was clearly a mistake and that he was trying to finish this without any pain. He tells him to think about it, that an adventurer's job is to risk their life and the reward can't be something served on a silver platter. One of them says not to hold a grudge, explaining that they're in a complicated situation with their payments, and asks honestly, isn't a bag like that too much for a porter to have? Our hero starts getting up thinking. So this is how it is, that the job of a dungeon porter often ends in death halfway through. And even if he dies, they could say he was killed by a goblin, and no one would find it strange. No matter how hard he tries, he's always treated like a tool. Then the expressions of those who once appreciated his dedication instantly turned into the expressions of people looking for loot. But in the end, he's not even shocked or shaken. This is something that happens all the time in this world. He thinks that in a world where your job is decided by birth, the treatment given to porters, one of the lowest ranked jobs, has never changed. Then he first acquired that skill, the bag skill, and he gathered the scornful looks of people who looked down on him. They told him that with that kind of skill, he couldn't register as an adventurer, and that his job should be as a porter, and that if he really wanted to join dungeon expeditions, he should register as a dungeon porter. So he thinks the world decided he couldn't be an adventurer and labeled him as a porter. He wonders if these guys think the same way, while one of the adventurers asks if he gets it now, adding that he should give everything up and then die. Then that man leaps at him with his weapon, calling him a stupid bag-carrying porter, and our hero gets ready to fight, thinking about his decision, asking himself if that decision isn't his alone to make. Quickly, our hero reaches into his magical bag. That adventurer attacks mercilessly, but he blocks it at the last moment with something he pulled out of the bag. The man is stunned, asking if he really blocked the attack. Then our hero plants his foot firmly on the ground and leaps toward the man. He gets ready to strike and hits that adventurer dead on with his sword. Another older adventurer looks shocked at our boy, who this time pulls out some kind of axe from his bag and hurls it at the bearded man, striking his crossbow directly. The group of adventurers is stunned to see the weapon break, and their leader asks how that's even possible. They wonder if one of their teammates just got taken out. Jephtham is furious about it, then he shouts that this doesn't make sense and asks why they can't take him down quickly. At that moment, our hero grabs a third item from his bag, and with one motion, he throws all the liquid over his attackers. They scream that it's hot. Then our boy appears through the smoke, wielding two weapons focused on his enemies. With a single blow, he splits one guy's shield in half, which leaves the man clearly terrified. Then he lands a direct hit on him, launching him backward from the impact. Finally, our boy looks at what's left of the group, who now seem a bit nervous about the situation. The leader can't believe what he's seeing, thinking that he just took down 3 adventurers with his bare hands. He wonders how that's even possible since that kid is just a white rank. He questions who that boy is, and looking at our hero he asks, "You?" Smiling excitedly, he says he's a dungeon porter. Sometime later, the group of adventurers is tied up outside the dungeon. That's when our hero seems to notice something. Cart approaches that location. Waving his arms, he yells that he's here, trying to draw attention and show he's present. Someone gets off the cart. The girl asks if he's the registered porter and says she heard about a crime inside the dungeon, so she came to investigate. Her name is Petra, an inspector. Looking a bit confused, she asks what exactly all this is. Then she asks what the hell happened in that dungeon, but our hero says it's better if she hears the explanation directly from them. A sound starts coming from inside his magic bag. The bag plays back the moment they were saying she was too flashy for a porter and telling him to shut up because they were going to kill him. Petra is surprised by this and says it's fascinating. The girl realizes it's a recorder disguised as a bag and comments that the design is kind of bad, but Nady says it's actually a bag that also records audio. Petra says that either way, she understands now that he was betrayed and they tried to kill him and that this is enough evidence. But she says she's curious how a porter like him managed to handle multiple adventures. She adds that it looks like they've been poisoned with smoked mushroom, and smiling, our hero asks if she knows about smoked mushrooms. The girl says she knows enough to say that you're not supposed to eat them, and if you do, you'll end up with a bunch of physical issues on top of that red face. So he explains that to make things simple. They ate some supplies that had mushrooms in them, and that happened right as they were about to attack. Then the symptoms began to show, and he asks her how lucky he was. After all, how else could a porter deal with adventurers like that? Then smiling, he asks one of the adventurers if that's right, and if he isn't telling the truth. The man looks at him, knowing it's a lie. They really did eat poisonous mushrooms, but it was clearly a trap they fell into. Excited, our hero was asking someone a question. He was asking if that man was really a gold rank adventurer. That one actually wasn't white rank. The two were exchanging attacks with great skill, and our hero seemed able to go toe-to-toe with the adventurer. He thought there was something strange. Even after spending so much energy on the boss, losing to a porter made no sense at all. At that moment, our hero questioned how he could ever defeat a mere goblin with such a slow sword. Then he leaped at the adventurer with his weapon, and the man thought how humiliating it was to be outdone by a porter with his provocations making him lose control. Counter-attacking, he thought that he was just a porter. They shouldn't even consider any other possibilities. Nady smiled while fighting the man, and he seemed to dodge his attacks effortlessly, mocking him and saying, "Getting close again? Try harder." He kept dodging while still mocking. The swordsman prepared to use his technique and started slashing at our hero nonstop, but he just kept dodging with no problem at all, laughing and mocking him at the end. The group's leader was shocked by the situation, and furious he called the porter a bastard, unleashing a powerful strike at him, only for him to dodge it again with ease. So going back to the point, the reason they lost to a porter. Shocked, Jephtham thinks it wasn't because the porter was strong, but because he himself had grown weak. He realizes his body is suddenly changing. He wonders why this is happening and why he feels like he's going to throw up. Smiling, our hero asks if he hadn't told him yet, then explains that he was poisoned. Nady says that the food they ate earlier was laced with a pulp mushroom poison, that it was masked in the taste of the meal, and explains that this serves as a form of insurance against shady employers like them. The leader of the group questions this while suffering from the poison, calling him a bastard and saying that if that's true, he screams that the porter had planned to lure them from the start, cursing him. But our hero just smiles satisfied. He asks the man how a delicate porter like him could ever trick adventurers like them and says it was only a safety measure just like he explained. He clarifies that whether betrayal happened or not depended entirely on them, and that in cases like this, he uses a catalyst to trigger the effects immediately. And he adds that normally he gives them an antidote to drink after finishing the dungeon, neutralizing that poison. But he says some idiot did something. He remembers when he was holding 2 bottles in his hands offering a drink, and someone broke one of them. Now excited, he asks what he's supposed to do about that, explaining that only one bottle of antidote is left. And even though everything happened like this, saying they were poisoned still sounds unbelievable. So the leader of the gang says fine. He says they just had bad luck and ate the wrong stew while wondering how he could admit he lost to a porter. He cries, regretting not eating that stew all by himself. Meanwhile, the inspector seems to be thinking it over. Finally, she says she understands and asks for the criminals to be taken away. The guy says his business there is done and asks if he can leave, but the girl asks him to wait a moment and asks if he's heading to the city to catch a ride. Our hero looks a little surprised by that and asks if it's free. Sometime later, the group is on the road toward the city. She comments that it's a shame he had such an unfortunate experience right after arriving in this city, and that in the name of the Adventurers Association, she apologizes to him. But the guy says it's okay and that porters are treated like tools, and the girl asks if that's really the case. She says that might be so, but there's something he needs to be warned about. And even though she understands he wasn't at fault in this incident, she explains that they won't see it that way. She says that the adventurers he defeated are all members of the Dawn Guild, and that it's a guild known for its arrogance and for its illegal activities. Therefore, regardless of the reason, if any of their members are harmed, they retaliate. So he should stay cautious for a while. But the next moment, she seems surprised by something. She calls out to our hero asking if he's listening, and he responds with a muffled voice that, yes, he is. He pulls his head out of that thing. Our hero says he's already told Gluttony not to show up in front of others since they freak out when they see him, but the little creature says it's hungry. The girl screams, asking what the hell that thing is. Embarrassed, our hero says it's nothing. She doesn't need to worry. That's Gluttony. He's been living inside his bag for who knows how long, and this creature is responsible for organizing the items in the bag. Before he started helping, all of the items were jumbled together inside. In exchange, he eats tons of magic stones. Now he says that considering how chaotic this dungeon was, Gluttony must have worked pretty hard too. But more than that, he gets to keep all the dungeon loot. He thinks it normally should have been split among the 4 adventurers. Feeling generous, he says he's in a good mood today and asks what Gluttony would think of getting double the magic stones this time. The creature happily begins eating the stones. Petra says it's the first time she's seen the creature and asks if it actually eats the stones, and our hero says it's also his first time seeing that, but Gluttony's chill. The girl says he's pretty fascinating, then corrects herself, saying his bag is fascinating and that she's never heard of anything like it. Suddenly, one of the horses gets agitated. Everyone is startled by the situation. She asks what's wrong, why the horses are acting up, but the soldier says he doesn't know. They just started acting like that. Suddenly, our hero seems to realize something. He looks behind him, thinking about that feeling. They remain there, unmoving while something strange is happening, and our hero thinks there's no doubt about it. Then he realizes it's a dungeon break, wondering why it's happening. Our hero calls out to the inspector. He points at something, showing it to her. He tells her he can feel there's a dungeon break just beyond those mountains. She pauses at the possibility. She says this is a huge problem and asks how he could possibly know, wanting to know if he has some kind of magical detection item. But our hero says it's his instinct. She doesn't understand and asks what he means by instinct. Heightened by the situation, he continues sensing that thing and says they don't have time for this. They need to move fast before more casualties happen. Petra thinks it's absurd that he can sense a dungeon break by instinct, while even she, as an inspector, can't detect it. That creature believes it's a real dungeon break. It thinks it likes magic stones and can smell them, so that must be the reason. There's a strong scent of magic stones coming from beyond those mountains, and it ends by saying it's absolutely certain of it. The girl says she understands and that they'll go check it out. When a dungeon exists for a long time, it can experience a catastrophic event known as a dungeon break, during which the monsters inside go berserk and start pouring out of it, massacring everyone in their path, and this is why they must subdue every dungeon in this world. So Petra says this really is a dungeon break. She explains they already passed the critical threshold a while ago, and that this break could happen at any moment now. Curious, she asks how he can sense this from so far away. Our hero says he could never forget that sinister feeling, and he remembers a situation from the past, something they should never forget. How horrifying these things become when a dungeon break occurs. The girl wonders if this man has already been in a dungeon break before. But even if he had, how could he possibly sense it now? Naughty says there's something strange about all this, that since the dungeon is close to a village, there's no way no adventurer has taken care of it until now. Petra agrees and says that according to the records, this dungeon had already been assigned. So our hero asks if she knows who accepted it and their rank. She says the dungeon is classified as rank D, and the adventurers who took it were 1 mithril rank and 2 copper ranks. Our hero is surprised that a mithril rank adventure was assigned to a rank D dungeon, and because of that, he has his suspicions. He adds that he needs to go to the village to confirm something and asks what she's going to do, to which she asks if this thing is related to his suspicions. Petra asks if the guard can transport the criminals to prison for her and says that as a dungeon inspector, she'll accompany our hero. Moments later, the two of them head toward the village, and sometime later they finally reach it. Once there, it seems they come across a strange situation. Our hero says that something is definitely going on here, and the girl agrees. Some people say that this should have been dealt with a while ago and still nothing has happened. They ask what's going to happen if a dungeon break occurs. A martial artist named Nero says they should take this to the group's leader, but a man says it's not their responsibility. This is Van Deshtar, a necromancer. Venslao is yelling, asking what they expect them to do when their leader just vanished. The villagers start shouting, calling them bastards. Our hero thinks that in the end, he was right, that judging by this situation, his suspicions were correct. A no-show at a dungeon happens when a high-ranking leader registers for a dungeon, but then a better one comes up. So that leader abandons the lower-ranked dungeon entirely. The girl explains that, of course, the association imposes fines in those cases. And our hero asks if that's basically just a band-aid solution, and the woman confirms that it is. He concludes that's it. The adventure can just bail and it's all fine. But the people in that place will lose everything when the dungeon break happens that night. He knows that even if they ask the Adventurers Association for help by the time they arrive, the village will already be reduced to ashes. Besides, it's clear those adventurers are just spewing excuses and avoiding responsibility. One of them says they're also victims since the leader bailed, and now they're just wasting time being blamed for it. Then adds that if they have any complaints, they should take it up with the Adventurers Association, saying they don't have to listen to this because they're not the ones responsible. Our hero thinks that adventurers aren't heroes or saviors. They're just ruthless people who only care about their own profit. But even so, in situations like this, they're necessary because only adventurers can handle a dungeon break, not someone like him, a mere porter. The inspector says it's unfortunate, but they should evacuate the village because saving lives is the priority. Our hero asks, saving lives? He questions if she truly believes lives can be saved. Then Petra apologizes and asks what he's talking about, and he replies that he was just thinking about something. Our hero says that winter is coming. And for those who have lost their homes, how could they possibly survive a long winter? He clutches an amulet tightly against his chest and says it would be impossible, then throws it forward, thinking that what this village needs right now isn't a porter. He adjusts another golden necklace on his chest while wondering why this is happening. Suddenly, he gets a bit too excited and tells her to look at what they have here. He says a dungeon break happened in a village he was just visiting. He asked the inspector if it's true that anyone who subjugates a dungeon break can claim all the spoils without paying any kind of fee, and the woman confirms that, yes, it's true. He laughs, saying he just hit the jackpot like winning the lottery. The adventurers wonder who that guy is. Could he actually be planning to take over that dungeon? Both of them are surprised by the color of that necklace. They ask if he might be a gold rank adventurer, thinking that maybe it's actually possible. Smiling gently, our hero asks if they're thinking about joining too and says in that case, he could split the reward 9-1. Then he asks if they have a deal. Naji thinks that for now, he'll pretend to be an adventurer. Our hero calls out to the inspector, asking what the penalty is for pretending to be an adventurer. The girl explains that the fine would start at no less than 1,000 gold coins, if she's not mistaken. That is the portal to a dungeon. This dungeon connects to an unknown dimension through that rift, and it's recommended to have an adventure of at least gold rank. In an ancient dance, no matter how hard it is, you just have to defeat the monsters. But there's something more. When the opponent in a dungeon is the space itself, even skilled adventurers can't predict its conditions before entering. That makes it a dungeon to be avoided given its high risk of disappearance and death. But they're in that dungeon to do a speed run. The inspector says that after checking the magical limits of the dungeon, she concludes it will collapse in 1 hour. So that's the time they have to complete it. But they know that an hour, no matter what, is tight, especially for a rift-type dungeon. Nagi says all they can do is hope it's an easy dungeon, and that in that case, they can't afford to lose even a single minute or second. So determined, they head into the dungeon. They cross through the rift and a massive flash of light appears. Petra watches it, visibly impressed. When they reach the other side, they see several rocks flying through the air. Excited, the adventurers comment that just a minute ago was nighttime, but this is another world. And the guy says that the story of the first special dungeon subjugation by the adventurer van is just beginning, and the girl is excited too. Ben adds that he'll do such a good job, the association will be speechless. The inspector laughs, saying he's only happy because he doesn't know anything, and adds that at first glance, she thought they were doomed, and our hero agrees with that. A little tense, Nadi says this scene looks kind of familiar. Looking at all those stones that lead up to a structure on top, he says it almost looks like it's written. Then the inspector says they'll have to climb for an hour, and asks how he managed to lie like that. And smiling, he says there's nothing they can do now. He explains that if they asked for help as a porter, the adventurers would just ignore them. But if he were a gold-rank adventurer, other adventurers would follow him. He adds that it's complicated, but if they don't subjugate it, a break will happen, and asks if that wasn't the reason she came. The girl confirms it was. Suddenly, Nero seems a little excited about the incursion. She asks why they're worried and says this is exactly why slow humans are no good. Then she crouches into a stance, yelling that she'll reach the top alone. She begins leaping over the rocks and climbing quickly. The guy gets worried and asks if that might be dangerous. When suddenly something happens to that girl, it looks like some energy grabs her by the wrist. She tenses up when she realizes something's wrong and collapses from up high like a puppet. The boy asks if she's stupid and says that even back in training camp, she's always acted this way, never thinking. She asks if he's scolding her. The boy snaps, saying she deserves it and that they learned rift-type dungeons have curses and restrictions. And the girl defends herself, saying she knows. In the end, Petra says it's alright, and that when entering a dungeon like this, the first thing they need to do is check for curses, while they wonder why they're chained up. The girl explains it seems to be the curse of the place, that they're connected by chains they can't see or touch. Nero says that, in that case, it won't be able to activate. Our hero comments that it seems tricks won't work in this dungeon after all, but luckily, they have full climbing gear. Nero is shocked by the sheer amount of stuff that came out of that bag. Excited, he says they should move forward step by step. In this kind of dungeon, the best option is to proceed step by step and not waste energy trying to climb quickly. However, they also shouldn't go too slowly. They should maintain a steady pace. So if he tells them to follow his lead and to remember that since they're connected by invisible chains, they must not stray too far from each other. He adds that they should keep going while maintaining a constant distance. Nero says the team leader is a bit slow and that she'll run ahead, but the boy says no. He says that instead of rushing because they're in a hurry, they should follow the planned route so they won't need to backtrack even if that's a bit slower. Then he thinks that even if they do follow the planned path, there might still be a problem. And it seems our hero ends up facing something like that. He thinks that rift dungeons are always full of variables. Then he sees that strange thing. And that stone creature opens its mouth and appears to eat one of the floating rocks. He thinks you just encountered an unidentified monster. The name of this monster is rock-eating stone boar. It's a powerful creature, but not aggressive, so there shouldn't be a problem as long as it's not provoked. Petra says she didn't expect to find one in a place like this. She explains that according to the bestiary, its excretion is also quite fast. Then we see it spit out another little rock into the air. She concludes that it seems to be changing the layout of the dungeon as it eats and expels rock. She's fascinated, saying the dungeon's ecosystem is amazing, while Nero laughs and says she looks happy. The girl apologizes and says it's her first time seeing one of those in person. But she also says that either way, this is a disaster because the path they were taking was completely erased, so only one solution remains. Our hero says they'll have to throw hooks at the stone boar and latch onto it with ropes. But there's a problem. If they miss and end up provoking the creature, then the boar will become aggressive, and they don't have the time or the power to deal with that. Van laughs at the situation and says if that's the problem then. As he begins to use some kind of magic power, he says it looks like this is finally his moment to shine. He tells everyone to pay attention, to watch as Van overcomes this challenge. Then he uses one of the necromancer's talents. Through some summoned fingers, creatures begin to appear, and in the next moment, a few ragdollins show up. Our hero says it's wonderful and that summoning abilities are rare. Petra says that if those creatures can place the hooks, they won't provoke the boar. But our hero starts to feel a bit tense, wondering why something feels off. Those creatures seem to begin trembling a little, when suddenly, one of their heads turns sideways. He starts to realize something's wrong with the way those creatures are moving. Nero says this was famous back at the training camp. He was known for not maintaining his summons, and they'd end up exploding. She tells him to shut up and says controlling summons is like moving your left and right hand separately while looking in a mirror. He says he'll do his best and that it'll be fine as long as they cross in 5 minutes. Our hero says he's uneasy because they don't have time, so he tells them to cross quickly before they explode. He quickly throws the hook and the creatures cling to the rock trying to grab it. By some miracle, everything seems to be working out. The porter asks him to hold on just a little longer, while Van tells them to be careful because there's some kind of neural link while the creatures are summoned. Our hero begins his crossing thinking that even though they face some trouble, they're still having a bit of luck. Then the group advances across the rope, and Nagi thinks that the skills of his companions are proving really useful in this dungeon. He believes those summons will make the dungeon easier. However, he feels like something is off because only 3 minutes have passed. Van tells them to move quickly since things have gotten really bad, but our hero says that's not it. He says the conditions have gotten strange. The boy does his best but apologizes, saying he's about to explode. He explains that he can't control the cracks that appeared when he struck the golem's head, and his nausea is also increasing. He won't be able to hold out. The surface of those creatures starts to crack, then suddenly they begin to explode, and a massive explosion happens next to that stone pig. The creature seems to have felt the blast and looks a bit irritated. The grappling hook comes loose, having nothing to anchor to, and the group of adventurers ends up being launched into the air. Our hero shouts that they're doomed. He orders them to grab onto anything they can. He thinks that if they fall all the way back to the starting point now, they'll never reach the top and that they need to mitigate this damage somehow. So he uses a secret technique from the porter's style. At the last moment, he manages to secure everyone's safety, and his bag launches them all back into the air with great force. They reach solid ground once again. Our hero asks if everyone is okay. Petra says yes and thanks the porter, then quickly corrects herself calling him an adventurer. But she adds that they lost a good chunk of their progress, wondering whether they'll make it to the top in time. Naughty says there's no other way to make it on time. So from now on, he says none of them can use their abilities anymore, and that from this point forward, they need to be prepared as he pulls out a special climbing item used by porters. Explaining that now they'll proceed vertically all the way to the top and that they must not lower their guard even for a second. If one person falls, everyone will fall together. He says that as they get closer to the top, traps and other variables will appear. There are falling rock zones and even a frozen zone, then a zone that heavily tests their stamina. Nero points out a strange-shaped rock nearby, and our hero tells her not to go near it because it's an explosive rock. In the next moment, the girl calls for help while the boy asks how much farther they need to go. Our hero says they're almost there, so please just hold on a bit longer. But they protest, saying he's already said that more than 10 times. Nero says she wants to fight monsters and didn't become an adventurer just to climb mountains. Our hero argues back, saying that this time he's serious, saying that he can see the top from where he is and that he can also see the boss waiting for them up there. Excited, the adventurers cheer at finally encountering a monster, and Van says he'll finally have his first official battle. The girl says she'll defeat the monster and prove something to those who ranked her as bronze, while Van supports her, suggesting they didn't receive fair treatment. Our hero seems to realize something, and by analyzing their physical abilities and the talents they've shown so far, he deduces that they shouldn't be bronze rank and that maybe they were given bronze rank because one of them is from a necromancer bloodline or because beastmen have been slaves for a long time. Nero says that if it doesn't go well, the leader will take care of it, and the boy agrees. After all, he's a gold rank. But our hero thinks the idea was for them to fight the monster themselves. Then the inspector asks them to wait a moment and says that something seems off up there. She says the boss at the top is a serpent dragon, but these monsters aren't originally made of stone because if the serpent dragon is purple, there's no other explanation unless it's already dead. Then it looks like that creature opens its eyes. Our hero is shocked and asks what she just said. A sword seems to pierce through the creature, and it looks like the owner of that sword is still there. A man is resting, leaning against the creature. He wonders what all the commotion is about, then he seems to notice something. From up above, he sees our hero's group, and Nagi wonders if he's feeling a killing intent. The man watches them from up there, and in the next moment, he leaps toward them. The group of adventurers waits silently, but something rushes past our hero an instant, and that man appears quickly beside all of them. He looks at our hero standing beside him. The porter seems impressed by his power. On his chest, there's a different insignia. and our hero wonders if it's a rank, thinking that this can only mean one thing, that this incident must not be a dungeon no-show. So the man finally says this is problematic, and he comments that he thought no one would enter this dungeon. He explains that this dungeon needs to break. Our hero thinks there are many people like this who act with a specific goal. Then the man says there's no need to complicate things, and that it's been decided those 4 died during the dungeon subjugation, and that led to the dungeon break. In this world, people register with the Adventurers Guild and receive a rank appropriate to their power. The first and lowest rank is the white rank. This rank is given to those without combat abilities like porters, guides, miners, or guild staff. The next is the beginner adventure stage where someone can officially become an adventurer. It's the copper rank. Those with minimal combat skills are recognized as copper-ranked adventurers, and even they possess abilities above ordinary people. The following rank is silver. This is for veteran and skilled adventurers who can handle dungeons well. Most adventurers reach this rank. The next rank is gold, and those who reach this level become raid leaders. This rank is only attainable by those with a lot of dungeon experience and exceptional abilities. These are the standard adventure classifications, and although rare, there are still higher ranks, platinum and mithril, and people refer to adventurers who reach those ranks as beyond human capability. Only those who transcend human common sense can achieve such ranks. And right there, surrounded by the group, is a mithril-ranked adventurer. Our hero feels tense about the situation. He realizes he can even sense the man's aura. He's genuinely impressed by him and thinks that even if they all attack together, they wouldn't be able to beat him. Our hero asks the inspector if she knows anything about this adventure, and she says yes, because there aren't many mithril ranks in the city. She tells him about the Dawn Guild she mentioned before and how arrogant they are, then explains that this is the raid captain of that guild. She finishes by saying that he's the berserker Durkin. The man comments that the girl's face looks familiar and realizes she's the one who works for the guild. He asks what she's doing in that dungeon and if she's pretending to be an adventurer, saying she holds a white rank. Petra says she would like to ask him something, then speaks, Sir Durican of the Dawn Guild. She follows up by asking why he hasn't cleared the dungeon yet and tells him it's going to collapse soon. She asks whether the first duty of an adventurer isn't to prevent that from happening. But the man with a half-psychotic look questions her about this so-called duty and starts laughing like a maniac. He asks what kind of duty she's talking about. He explains that adventurers act only for their own benefit and offers an example. The man asks whether it isn't more profitable to let a dungeon break happen than to actually clear it, and Petra wonders what he's talking about. Our hero seems to have understood the situation. He thinks that he never believed adventurers were heroes or warriors, but to think that adventurers like this exist, it's garbage. And if this guy is truly planning to cause a dungeon break, he needs to stop him by any means necessary. But there's a problem with that. Since the opponent is a mithril rank, fighting head-on is reckless. So for now, he'll do something else. Our hero laughs and says it seems there's been a misunderstanding here. He explains that they're just adventurers who ended up in the dungeon and seem to have accidentally annoyed him. So he asks him to accept this gift as an apology. It's an exciting skewer from a Dunstoren master. The man is surprised, asking if that food came out of the bag. Then Naji asks if he isn't starving being in the dungeon so long. He knows that facing this trash directly isn't an option, so he needs to make a different decision. He decides that he has to weaken him. The man eats happily, finding it amazing. It's hot and the flavor feels like it was just freshly cooked. He's delighted and says it's truly incredible. He says the meat isn't just perfect, the shrimp is too. Our hero thinks he should eat as much of that food as he wants, but suddenly, the man says there's something special. That the flavor of the ash mushrooms that was added is superb. He asks him if he really thought that filthy little trick would work, then our hero thinks he's doomed. The man gets ready to attack, saying this is payment for the food. That attack is extremely fast, and our hero barely has a chance to dodge. He takes a direct hit. Naji is sent flying. Girl screams because she's chained to our hero, so she begins to get dragged along with him, but he lands on a nearby surface. She asks what they should do now. The man quickly approaches, asking if this is for real. Are they such rookies that they couldn't resist the curse of the chains? The girl turns, ready for battle, and the man charges at her, saying this dungeon will be their last. The man prepares an attack as she tenses, bracing for the impact. Vane yells for her not to just stand there and gets ready to join the fight. A huge explosion erupts atop that rock, and a smoke cloud with flaming sparks rises in the area. From its center, the bazaar appears. He asks what this brutish summon creature is. He asks if the boy is a beginner necromancer, and Van asks if it's him. That raid leader who allowed them to join the dungeon but never showed his face, and the man asks what that's supposed to mean. He says he was wondering who the fools were accepted the request for this dungeon everyone else avoided, and now he sees it was them. He adds that he heard they're a bunch of idiots. Van tells Nero not to be scared because when the raid leader returns it'll be 3 against 1, and they just have to hold him off until then. Especially if the attacks continue to be physical impact, the Goblins can endure indefinitely. So they charge in, saying to fight like they did during training. The berserker shows up excited about the fight, then another powerful blow hits the top of the rock. Our hero doesn't seem to be in good condition, but he starts regaining consciousness. While the girl asks if he's okay, she explains that she performed emergency first aid. So he thanks her and says he must have passed out for a moment, asking how things are going. The girl says honestly it's not good. She explains that Nero and Van are fighting hard. The girl gets ready to deliver a direct strike, but the berserker easily blocks it. Then she spins on her feet for another attack, while the man defends again without taking any damage and looks at her with a murderous glare. He grabs the golem by the head and spins it around, using the creature to smash Nero. And as expected, considering that opponent, they won't be able to hold him off for long. He says it looks like he made a mistake. He should have considered the possibility that the poison wouldn't work. The girl seems confused by this. Then he asks if he can know more about that guy. If he's a mithril rank, he must be famous, and the girl says he's right. She explains that in close combat, he's unmatched among the ranks. And beyond that, he has a considerable number of completed dungeons, and he's also known for multiple clashes with other adventurers, making him a specialist at this, especially when he uses his great sword techniques. He's famous for cutting ogres in half with a single blow. Noddy says it's a relief he doesn't have his sword right now, and the girl agrees. Our hero says he was hoping to hear something like a weak point, but that's just depressing. She adds that the big issue is, even if by some miracle they manage to defeat him, time will have already run out because they don't have any left, so no matter how close the goal is, they won't reach it in time. She says that if it weren't for the curse of the chain, they could at least try to split up. Our hero asks, the curse of the chain? Then he seems to realize something about all this. He knows they can't see or touch it, but they're connected by a chain, and that's a problem because if one falls, they all fall. But on the other hand, that might be a strength because if you think about it differently, if one climbs, they all climb. So they can turn a problem into a solution, and maybe that's the answer to defeating both a mithril-ranked adventurer and the time limit at the same time. He starts thinking it through. Even if he's just a fake raid leader, and even if he were the real one, he should make the most of the cards he has, and each of them might not be much alone, but together it's something. By using his tools and the adventurer's skills, if he plays all those cards, he wonders if they might have a chance. He asks Petra to analyze the terrain with her ability and calculate the distance, and the woman says that with it being this close, she could do it easily and even draw a map. Our hero smiles and asks her to do it quickly. So the woman uses her explorer talent and starts drawing something with a quill. She creates a 3D map of the area. Our hero is impressed by it and says the accuracy of that map exceeds all expectations. He adds that she's a top-tier investigator, but the girl says that's just the basics. Petra then asks what he's going to do with it, and the boy explains that he'll use it to aim at the monster. He says this fight isn't against humans. This fight is against a human and a monster. Naji explains that adventurers often encounter monsters stronger than them inside dungeons and asks if she knows how they manage to defeat such monsters. She asks if it's through strategies based on experience, but our hero smiles and says she's wrong. He then begins to explain that the secret to adventurers defeating monsters stronger than themselves is dirty tactics, and that they win thanks to those improper tactics. So to defeat that monster, suddenly our hero leaps from the spot he was in, saying he'll do it the same way, and that they too must fight dirty. All of a sudden, something is launched toward the berserker. Of course, he notices it. Smiling, he catches the arrow with ease. Our hero thinks he thought the arrow would work as a surprise attack. Then something unexpected happens. He uses a porter trick, the well-aimed spider web shot. That guy realizes it's hard to move, and at that moment, our hero appears in front of him. Smiling, the berserker asks if it's going to be a head-on confrontation and thinks he must be feeling confident now. Then our hero reaches into his bag again and prepares another porter trick, throwing mushrooms all over the area. The man looks suspiciously at the attack. When our hero announces the attack, mushroom storm, mushroom barrage, dust and smoke cover the entire area. The berserker doesn't like the fact that the whole area is filled with smoke and thinks this guy is an annoying opponent. Van seems to be badly injured. Our hero asks if everyone is okay. They say they're managing, so Noddy says that's a relief. He asks if Van can summon more familiars, and he begins inspecting his fingers, which are still regenerating. But it seems 2 fingers are still intact, so he can summon 2 more creatures. Our hero says that's good and might be enough. He tells them to listen closely and says there's a way to get through this situation. In the next moment, it seems the berserker has broken free from the webs. He says it's such a pain and that he's never heard of a swordsman fighting like this. He wonders if he grabbed his teammates and ran to another rock and that this is a meaningless fight. Then suddenly someone appears near him. It seems like that person mutters something incomprehensible. The berserker realizes it's a golem. He says spreading smoke is useless if you make noise, so he charges in the direction he heard the sound. With his fist glowing with power, he gets ready to strike, then unleashes another one of his powerful attacks, landing a direct hit on whoever it is. Smoke and debris scatter in all directions. That guy looks a bit satisfied with his strike, but gets disappointed in the next moment. He sees a golem hand emerge from the smoke, and that creature leaps at him and hugs him. He's shocked by the situation. He asks how a golem could speak, but the next moment he realizes it wasn't the golem. The voice came from that strange bag. Then the bag says he's been kidnapped. Confused, he wonders where they are and questions if that's a rope as he sees our hero holding it. The berserker wonders if they plan to sneak up to the top while distracting him, but he tells the so-called swordsman that this was pretty lame. Because once he's been discovered, he won't be able to use that to climb now. Our hero asks if he's sure about that, then it looks like he's doing something, and Naji asks if it's far enough already because they need to move fast before getting caught. Straining, the boy asks them to wait just a bit longer and explains that it's his first time controlling something like this from such a distance. It seems he used one of his last fingers. Then he says he doesn't need to worry, and that hope begins to reach its target. At the tip of that object, a finger is hanging, and when they reach the top, something begins to happen. Then Van says he'll make sure everything works out. That bear golem moves toward the dead dragon. It continues its path as it starts to fall apart, pulling hard on that grappling hook rope. There's just a little left before it reaches the boss. Then it leaps, aiming straight at the creature, and Van from below yells for it to go. Finally, the hook latches onto the dragon, and that golem starts showing signs that it's going to explode. From below, they see the massive explosion and the top area beginning to crack. The berserker can't believe what he's seeing. You ask if all that was just to trap him in that place and realize how dangerous the situation is. He thinks he needs to get out of there quickly and starts trying to break free from the golem. But Van, with a satisfied look, says it won't be that easy. He adds that the thumb may be slow, but it's the strongest of them all. Our hero keeps holding on to that rope, thinking that this isn't a fight between humans. It's a fight between humans and a beast. The area where the creature was defeated begins to crack. He thinks there are beasts that simply can't be beaten as that creature starts falling from above. And he adds that his goal isn't to take down the beast just as the defeated dragon starts falling toward the berserker. It seems like that dragon is dropping straight onto him, and it hits him directly in the next moment. Even so, he seems unable to believe what just happened. He notices that the hook and rope are lodged into the creature. It looks like the rope is still anchored up there, and it shakes everything around. Our hero thinks there's no need to face him in direct combat. And in the next moment, everyone starts getting pulled up by that rope. With a satisfied look, our hero says to run. The berserker is terrified and can't believe everything that just happened. The group approaches the floating castle. They run at full speed. One of them yells to hold on a bit longer. They're almost at the end of the dungeon, and time is running out too. Only 5 minutes left. It's tight, but still possible. To be honest with you, Nero, you were a huge help, says the smiling guy. With the strength Niji has, he wouldn't have been able to throw that rope over 50 meters high. And to think it was possible with just raw strength, recalling the moment when the girl threw the rope, our hero remembers that it was truly amazing. Blushing, she says it was nothing. The necromancer pauses deep in thought. This is something someone strong could do, and even an idiot could have done it. The adventurer says as Nero glares at him in anger. No matter what anyone says, this dungeon had someone stand out. And clearly it would be Vandishtar since he put the rope in the exact place. He also took down that Dan Berserker. Maybe the guy's even better than a mithril-ranked adventurer. Everyone seems excited. Smiling, Nagi believes the other two probably never completed a dungeon before. The joy of finishing a dungeon doesn't come from incredible skill alone, but from the fact that everyone worked together. Doing it that way gives you motivation. That's why Petra's contribution was the greatest in the group, but the adventurer doesn't agree with that. She knows that the dungeon supervisor has some investigative ability and that he might have done some basic work, but the girl created an incredibly precise map. Thanks to that map, the group could easily calculate their positions. The quality of her work was professional, and Petra is happy to know that. She believes that when you look at the big picture, Nadi did an excellent job creating a plan and making it work. And she wonders if the boy really is a porter and if porters are actually that useful. Vandishtar then asks the leader about the berserker. After everything that enemy did, he should spend the rest of his life in prison, and the group should make sure he never becomes an adventurer again. Well, Petra begins slowly. It's true that the man did something awful, but he's a mithril-ranked adventurer. The higher your rank, the more immune you become to punishment. And if someone's at mithril level like him, they have strong protections from the state. The young woman continues saying that this means something, but she's cut off by Nero, who says that's outrageous. Petra adds that the guy will probably be fine in the end, and that's it. The martial artist and Vanishtar show even more frustration, grinding his teeth in anger. The necromancer says, whatever. Even if the law is like that, if the group ever meets the opponent again outside the dungeon, the young man will take him down once more. That's a dangerous thought, says Naji. The berserker's power was just the tip of the iceberg. Look around. Those who were defeated are from the Rachna clan who guarded the entrance of the citadel. The adventurer wiped them all out by himself, saying they would have done the same if given the chance. The group's two fighters are excited, but our hero stays dead serious. He says the next part is important and asks them to observe the enemy's wounds. All of them were destroyed with a single strike. Shocked, they repeat, one blow. The adventurer's real talent emerges when he's using a matching weapon. When the berserker fought them, he used a great sword or his special talents, finishing them with sheer brute force. The power difference was massive, says the necromancer, but it makes sense. When he defeated the pseudo-panther dragon that had taken his son, there was a great sword stuck in its heart, and the man must have taken down even the boss with a single hit. Naji looks back for a moment. Ever since the guy fell with the dragon, he's recovered. Suddenly, someone is holding a massive sword with both hands, his weapon again. There's the berserker, so far yet so close, watching the piece of land where the adventurers stand. Very pleased, he says, bingo time to really get started. A red light glows right next to Naji, who looks distressed. You're punks, the man says as he slashes the ground in front of our boy. Once again, the young man turns back and now shouts everyone. The slash continues to tear the ground as if it were paper passing between the group, and a single idea emerges. Revenge. That strike reaches all the way to where Vandishtar is. He panics, thinking that must be the end for him. The blow is so strong that it rips off part of the platform, which begins to fall, and the guy did all that from a distance. Someone's hands are injured from trying to hold on. There they are, for adventurers who, by some miracle, are still alive somehow. Injured, Naji asks if they're okay. Petra, who is the closest, answers that she's fine, while some kind of chain keeps the two of them connected. That chain extends to Nero, who hears from her companion that the other two below seem to be badly hurt, especially Van, who is completely unconscious, but the object is keeping him attached too. The boy knows this is a bad situation. Looking to the side and seeing smaller floating stones nearby, he reflects on the destructive power of that attack. Not to mention that the enemy has already started moving to pursue them. What kind of bizarre power is that? The boy wonders. Nadi sees that if he hesitates, the berserker will catch them. The group has about 3 minutes left, and if the boy wants to avoid a collapse, he only has one chance. Trying to motivate himself, he says to himself, I'm a porter. I've trained my body by carrying an insane amount of load, so carrying things is no problem, he thinks as he gets ready. This will be the same, he tells himself, clenching his fist. Just a bit more force, and the chain on his wrist seems to pulse intensely. It'll be like moving one more load, and Naji pulls his arm up a bit. The whole group seems to be getting lifted because of that. I'll take the lead, says the boy with a fierce expression. Then the young man opens his hand like he's unsheathing claws. Like that, he slowly climbs the stone wall. He keeps at it for a while. It's a hard job after all. He's carrying others with him. The dungeon doesn't care about that problem, and there's less and less time before it shuts while someone stomps the ground forcefully. It's the berserker still chasing the group who just made another leap to close the distance. There's even less time than before. After struggling, Naji reaches the top again. He carries the unconscious necromancer, and the girls follow right behind, helping each other. Now the sand is about to run out. Something passes by so fast that it's impossible to tell what it was. Tireless, the enemy remains focused on his target. He seems quite pleased with something. The boy is tense about something. Final moments of that countdown. There's where they need to go, and it's so far. And at the same time, it's so close that it gleams. The adventurers enter the place. In front of them, they see a floating stone. That is the dungeon stone. All bruised, our hero says just that. He puts his hand inside the bag and explains that all they need to do is destroy it. He pulls out a sword, throws it toward the object, and yells that once it breaks, everything will be over. The weapon is about to strike the stone. However, at that exact moment, a thunderous noise occurs. Full of arrogance, the berserker appears. To Nadi's shock, he didn't expect that twist. The bastard jumps in the path of the weapon just before it can hit. He strikes it with his own sword. Unfortunately, the thrown object now lies next to the stone. The time is, the man begins to say as the jewel starts to crack. As if coordinated with the stone, as he says time is up, the object explodes simultaneously. Naji can barely believe it. A massive explosion of light bursts from where the floating jewel was. Then a red flash appears. It shoots off in multiple directions. This is happening in a village. A citizen watches the strange energy with rage. But upon realizing what it is, he kneels and begins to pray. "You've abandoned us," he says, kneeling. A creature with red eyes emerges from the light. Another, which looks like a wolf, follows. Soon after, several others start emerging from what seems to be a portal, and they all look bloodthirsty. A monster that looks like a shark appears too. The shark warrior steps out of the portal as a woman kneels before the sea of monsters. The girls noticed that the monsters revived and keep dropping from the portal. In other words, it's a dungeon break. Someone is looking very pleased while holding Nagi by the neck. "How magnificent. I never get tired of seeing this no matter how many times," says the berserker. Our hero realizes from what he just heard that this isn't the first time the man has caused a dungeon break. The man confirms it, explain that someone like Nagi wouldn't understand. A dungeon that suffers a break will regenerate into a more powerful version, and that means better rewards. All of this over something so small. It's clear the warrior didn't care about the suffering of the people in that city. Mocking his reaction, the berserker repeats sarcastically, "Small." He emphasizes that adventurers value good rewards and adds that he couldn't care less about what happens to those trash people. Typical. Adventurers aren't heroes or saviors. They're selfish and only care about their own gain. I really hate this type of adventure, the ones with both great power and wickedness, Niji thinks. He realizes how much suffering they bring to the world. He thinks again while watching a bird in flight. The bird continues flying, soaring over the portal. What happens next is rare. Some adventurers and the black bird flaps its wings violently. Some people have deep power within and also a strong sense of justice. Now someone is visible atop the bird. That person is eating bread. While eating, she says already adventurers like them. And the woman have a calm gaze. She says her target has been marked. Then she does a flip, ready to strike someone. "I'll get rid of this rift before it grows even more," the woman says as she prepares a power with her sword. She strikes the dungeon break with something that looks like lightning, which also hits the shark monster. The smoke caused by the power sends the enemies into a panic. That fire slowly takes down some of the monsters. Another strike hits more of them, cornering others. The creatures are so confused and terrified, they don't know what to do. The berserker is still there, and so is Petra, who's scared of what might happen. Now the newcomer lands on the ground. "I am the vice captain of the Twilight Wind Guild, Agnisafarid, and I want an explanation of what happened here," she says. This woman is a mithril-ranked adventurer. Something seems to be happening to the dungeon break even though there are still monsters alive. Naji is badly hurt after the fight. His companion is worried and asks if he's okay, and smiling, the boy replies yes, saying there's something more important. He asks Petra to look just over there. Indeed, it's now clear that something is happening at the portal. It's unbelievable what their eyes are seeing. The two observe as the dungeon break is slowly closing, but the berserker doesn't seem happy about it. Even if it was a lower-tier dungeon break, the man is impressed that it was closed with a single strike. He thought that guild had been wiped out. He asks what brought her here since that place has been inactive for 3 years. The woman begins to speak, Durkan of the Dawn Guild. Judging by this scene, no explanation is needed. It made no sense for a mithril-ranked adventurer to fail in that dungeon, so the break was caused on purpose. Excited, the berserker asks if the girl is trying to start a fight. Agnesa is someone he's always wanted to fight. On the other hand, it's not an ideal situation, especially since Naji Maiden used more stamina than expected. There's also a strict order from the master to avoid causing a big mess. Besides, the man has already completed his primary objective. As he grabs his great sword, he finishes his thought. There's no need to fight. With her hand on her weapon, the woman asks if he's running away since he turned his back. Don't get it twisted. The warrior explains calmly. Even the success of a high-ranking adventurer depends on variables, and I can't guarantee victory. Petra shouts with all her strength that he's a liar. That man wasn't just avoiding clearing the dungeon. He tried to destroy her group. The guy simply asks if he really tried to do that just now. Smiling, he says it seems like there's some kind of curse in that dungeon that makes first-timers unable to tell friend from foe. And he even adds that this means attacking the group before wasn't intentional, which leaves the girl outraged. They could check for themselves, but unfortunately, the dungeon turned to dust. That explanation seemed good enough for the association to accept and for a white rank to believe too. Of course, it makes no sense, but countless times, the weight of a mithril rank holds more authority than the truth no matter how many copper or white adventurers testify against it. Even speaking the truth won't bring victory, and the worst part is that bastard knows it and takes advantage of the situation. Still quite pleased, Durkan says they're done there and says goodbye. See you next time, pups. Those people stood still watching him walk away. Relieved, Nadi says the dungeon break. It was stopped, and now he shows signs of exhaustion. He collapses to his knees with full force, leaving the girls worried about him. Agnesa looks at the boy for a moment. He's been through a lot and he's exhausted. He's also covered in wounds. Suddenly, wings are seen flapping strongly. Put the boy here. Aegonon can take us back to the city in no time. The girls watched the woman decide the Thunderbird, and so the chaotic expedition into the dungeon rift came to an end. The village welcomed the morning without a single scratch. Later, the Adventurers Association paid a visit, offering apologies and promising to prevent future incidents. Of course, that was all just empty talk. And thanks to Agnes' help, our hero was rescued. He was able to reach the western adventurer city, Bellum. Somewhere deep within that beautiful city lies the nest where the wind rests, the Twilight Wind Guild office. Naji is sleeping like a baby. He slowly wakes up from a deep sleep and seems unsure where he is or that he even blacked out. I opened my eyes and saw I was on a beat-up bed, the boy thinks. With effort, the boy sits up. He then asks where he is, and in front of him, Petra is asleep, resting her head on the bed. Gradually, the girl begins to wake up from the sound of voices. Relieved that he's awake, the girl starts asking how he's doing. His other 2 teammates are there too, acting more energetic, saying they were really scared. Where am I? I remember the moment the berserker left, but I think I blacked out after that, says Naji. They explained that this is the Twilight Wind office and that the nice lady saved him. Even a priest from the church was called to heal him. That must be why he has no injuries, just fatigue, and his friends seem fine too. This is nothing for a first-class adventurer, and I trust in my stamina, the 2 say. Someone clenches their fist tightly and says, anyway, as the first adventure with the name Van Deshtar, it was quite a journey, he says proudly. When I saw the happiness of the villagers that we stopped the dungeon break, the boy continues. I realized what the true role of an adventurer it is, he concludes. A cheerful little girl hands a flower to the necromancer, thanking him for protecting the people. It was just a dungeon meant for rewards and glory. But for those people, it was their home. Then they apologize for being arrogant to a citizen. And to Naji, the 2 say they'll become great adventurers and that they saved the village. Happy, our hero says that was good to hear. He feels good that the group protected the village. But now that everything's over, he can finally reveal the truth. He wasn't a gold rank adventurer. In reality, he was ranked lower than everyone else there. He was just a white tier porter. He wonders if they'll treat him the same and immediately answers himself, of course not. Naughty starts choosing his words carefully. I need to tell you guys something. Please don't be upset, the boy says. His friends seem a bit nervous about what they're about to hear. The boy confessed that he pretended to be an adventurer and acted as their leader. Naturally, their reaction was, that's it? We get it. There was no other way, says Nero. The bond that once existed between them fades, and now they're just adventurers and a porter again. The girl also says that next time she'll ask him to carry the gear. As they leave, she tells him the group will be away for a while and tells Naji to get some rest. Finally, they close the door behind them. Petra asks if he really needed to tell the truth to the two of them, and he replies with a laugh that they'll both become great adventurers. Working as a porter in that city, he'll likely run into them again. The boy says it's better they heard it from him and found out some other way later on. The girl feels sad for her friend, but he seems resolute. It's true. He's still not an adventurer, and in her work as an inspector, she comes across many. Most of them care only about personal gain. They wouldn't hesitate to commit atrocities for it. Unlike heroes or warriors, adventurers live solely for profit, but not our boy. Even with nothing to gain, he conquered the dungeon. He risked his life with just one goal, to save the villagers without asking for anything in return. So even if you're not an adventurer, says Petra, taking his hand. She finishes her thought, you're a hero. For a moment, the boy closes his eyes, then suddenly opens them, thinking in shock, there's no way on that. While everyone's attention is on the conversation between Durkin and Agnesa during the break, the boy looks elsewhere and notices something happening. A bright golden light bursts out of the rift. What a lucky day. It was a dungeon rift completion reward. Nadi skips cheerfully over to the chest behind everyone. He squeezed out every last bit of strength to grab it before collapsing from exhaustion. The boy is truly happy to have done that. He took the entire reward for himself 2 times in a row and plans to check it later. Petra wasn't the only one who didn't understand the boy that day, neither did the other two. Nero even speaks to her friend. You're saying the leader is a porter. Vandishtar asks the girl as she figured it out too. Obviously, right? She replies. The necromancer responds, well, of course. So Navy is pretending to be a lame porter while actually being a gold rank adventurer. Our hero probably thinks he fooled the duo or that they're idiots, but the porter knows now that they were more innocent than he thought, especially since Nero says she'll keep the secret. Honestly, it's hard to believe Naji is just a porter after fighting like that, and that whole event became a snowball. The berserker walks across a bridge. A man says he's heard some stories and asks if there was interference. He says it's a disgrace. They ran into a strange swordsman and then got entangled with the Twilight Wind Guild. He asks the berserker if he remembers Duken versus Veneslo. He adds that the Dawn Guild won't turn a blind eye to those who heard it, whether it's a fake adventurer or a Twilight Wind member. Meanwhile, Agnesa walks through the headquarters of her guild. She thinks that if what Nadi told her on the way there is true, then Nadi might be. She remembers talking with Petra. She says it'll still take a while to reach the city, so she asks if she can tell the full story, how she got seriously injured, and why she was there. Agnesa says she wants to hear everything, and Petra looks a little tense. She asks if the girl entered the Rift Dungeon without permission, and Petra, embarrassed, asks how she knew that. Agnesa says the composition of her group doesn't match the official record, but she says it's fine that it's just a personal conversation between them, no formal responsibility. Then she says she just wants to confirm something. Agnesa says she's been investigating the recent string of dungeon breaks, and she's found a possible connection to the Dawn Guild, and today, it happened nearby. Petra becomes curious and questions the connection. Agnesa confirms it but says it's only a theory, though anything she can share would be useful. Petra says that if it's something like that, then she understands. But she says the illegal actions of Naji must be kept absolutely secret. She tells the girl that, in fact, she should praise him. Then she says she'll explain everything that happened, how they entered that dungeon, and what went on while they were inside. Agnesa thinks that the gold-ranked adventurer who led them was actually just a porter, and even then, they nearly managed to conquer that dungeon. She believes that if it weren't for the interference of the Dawn Guild, he would have succeeded, and that would have been unbelievable under the command of a porter. She thinks what most deserves praise is his mindset. Choosing to risk his life to prevent a dungeon break, our hero looks at her and says that she was the one who saved them. Agnesa asks if he's sure, and the boy thanks her again, repeating that it was thanks to her. Then the girl says she understands and will get straight to the point. She declares that by the authority of Agnesa Farid, vice-captain of the Twilight Wind Guild, she orders him to join her team. Smiling kindly, our hero says no and thanks her. The Twilight Wind Guild is one of the most prestigious guilds in the city, or at least it used to be. After the guild leader disappeared, it started to decline. And now, after a long time, a guild meeting is taking place. A girl says she's against it and that no matter how desperate their guilt is, they can't just accept anything. This is and a gold rank summoner. Then someone says what everyone else is thinking. Nine's also a gold rank, says he agrees and that Agnesa acted on her own. And above that, the man asks if he's just a porter pretending to be an adventurer, saying that a porter and a fraud doesn't sound like anything special. Pororo, a bronze-ranked priest, asks if it's really necessary to be so harsh and says he's in favor of recruiting him. The girl says if he's in favor, it must be because the guy has a pretty face. But Pororo responds heatedly that that's slander and that he's only focused on healing him, though his messy hair does look kinda cool. Stone Mong tells them to stop fighting since there's no point, saying that Agnesa is already gone. He's a bronze-ranked tank adventurer, and asks whose side he's on, while Pororo warns him to think carefully or he might lose his heel. Feeling the pressure, he stammers trying to explain his point when suddenly someone appears saying there's no need for debate. Then another woman shows up and explains that they've been rejected. The entire group is shocked by the news that they were rejected, and seems unable to believe it. Meanwhile, in another place, our hero is in his room. He starts wrapping his hands in bandages and tying up his messy hair, saying that now everything's set. His friend asks if it wouldn't be better to rest a bit more before heading out, but he says he's fine and that standing still only makes him uneasy. She says she understands and asks why he refused the guild's offer since guilds come with a lot of benefits. Our hero says he knows that joining a guild comes with many perks, but on the other hand, getting involved with lots of people leads to headache. He explains that he prefers how things are now, simple and familiar. Petra says that if that's what he prefers, she won't pressure him. But she insists that this is the second time he's crossed paths with the Dawn Guild and asks if it wouldn't be safer to be under a guild's protection. But he tells her not to worry, and that either way he managed to come out unscathed both times, and asks if she really thinks they'd go after a mere porter. Running off, she says it's fine then, and that she needs to return to the association. And our hero smiles and thanks her for everything. But she says she's the one who should thank him, and if he ever needs anything, he should come see her at the association. Our hero gets thoughtful for a moment, but then gives a gentle smile and nods. Excited, he thinks about checking the rewards before leaving since he really wants to know what he got, imagining it could be a weapon or something valuable. Then he opens the bag and calls out for Gluttony. Practically diving into the bag, he asks where he went. He starts rummaging through it, asking where he's hiding until he finally finds the little creature. Our hero asks why he didn't show up when called and questions that strange look on his face, but the creature says it's nothing. He asks if the creature saw what's inside the chest and what kind of rewards they got, but the little thing says there's nothing. Naughty says that sounds a bit suspicious, but Gluttony insists there's nothing suspicious about it. However, our hero doesn't seem convinced. He tells the creature to step aside so he can check for himself, while the little one screams no. Our hero begins to open that beautiful chest, wondering what kind of treasure they might find. But suddenly, he's stunned by what he sees. Then he asks what those things are. He wonders if those creatures are the offspring of some kind of being, but he is more interested in understanding why they are inside that chest. He questions Gluttony about what is happening and what happened to the reward. Gluttony looks a little tense. He then explains that he did nothing wrong and was simply organizing the bag as usual. And when he opened that chest to arrange things, he noticed there were items inside that resembled stones. Then suddenly, one of them began to crack and a small hand emerged. The creature was fascinated by it, and out of nowhere, those little beings were born. Our hero thinks that if this story is true, then they must be stone monsters. He assumes that some people with the talent to tame creatures might want to buy them now that they have hatched. However, they do not seem to be the type of creature a tamer would desire, and that is a problem because he needed to replenish what he used in the dungeons. So he wonders what he should do with those little beings. Gluttony says they are unfortunate creatures because he heard from them that their parents were exploited by the dragon serpent, and he pleads to be allowed to raise them, promising to take good care of them. Then he decides they might be useful and that they will keep them for now. He tells the little one to take care of them, but if they start causing trouble, he will have to let them go. Excited, Gluttony says he received permission and adds that they can stay there. Our hero appears slightly tense upon seeing this. Suddenly alarmed, he tells them to wait and asks if there are more than just 3. In the next scene, he is already outside the bag. Tense, he realizes it is complete chaos inside. He sees that the reward from the Rift Dungeon was a complete failure, but at least there is still the reward from the Cave Dungeon. Excited once again, he decides to go exchange those items. He arrives at a trading post, He is selling all his magic stones and monster loot. The elderly man there hands him a money pouch. Satisfied, he says it has been a long time since he earned so much money. So first, he will restock his supplies. He buys more snow mushrooms and finally gets some explosive mushrooms he previously could not afford. He also replenishes his food supply and sharpens his weapons and restocks his flash bombs. He sets aside a portion of the money to give to Van and Nero. And finally, with what remains, he thinks he might go on a small culinary tour for himself. So he happily strolls through the city while someone watches him from a distance, asking if it is really him, wondering if he is the young man who caused problems with the Dawn Guild. This person thought it was just a rumor, but now he sees that the boy truly is a white rank. He thinks that sending genuinely weak individuals to prison is one thing, but he heard that the boy managed to deal with Durkin. So he asks what Zero thinks, wanting to know if the boy seems strong to him. That shadowy figure says that if it happened twice, it cannot be a coincidence, and even someone of white rank can be powerful, so they must be cautious. He explains that he normally would not care about someone of white rank, but this one might actually have some hidden ability. Then he says he has expectations that he hopes the boy does not disappoint him. He prepares himself from the top of a rooftop and makes a powerful leap forward. Our hero is walking peacefully through the city, enjoying the moment, until suddenly he seems to notice something. The stick of the popsicle he is eating splits in half, and that man brushes past his face with a powerful attack. Naji yells, asking who he is. Excited, the man says he is starting with hostile intent and adds that the young man is already reacting. He says he is certain that Niji is not just a common porter and that he is intrigued now, but there is something more, that this cannot be the end, while our hero merely smiles, wondering what this man is talking about. Then, without any warning, the man attacks again, and Naji barely manages to dodge the strike. The opponent demands that he stop holding back and show what he is capable of, saying he wants to see the abilities he used to challenge his guild. Our hero becomes slightly tense with the situation and wonders who this person truly is. He notices the emblem on the man's chest and realizes he is a gold-ranked mage, but he is confused as the man fights like an assassin. Our hero senses all of his hostility and realizes he cannot simply stand still, so he decides to act and pulls a weapon from his bag. His opponent asks if he is ready to get serious now and says he wants to see what kind of sword techniques he used to face Jeffman. Then our hero charges with some mushrooms tied to his sword and uses a set of special porter tools, specifically a low-grade explosive mushroom bomb. Suddenly, a massive explosion goes off. Smiling, he says only a lunatic fights adventurers head-on, and now he decides it's time to run. As he runs, he thinks he's going to die. He starts shouting in the middle of the street, begging for help, asking someone to save him. He yells for the guards and says someone is trying to rob him. A guard approaches and asks what's going on. He points and says that man is a thief pretending to be an adventurer and that he tried to kill him. The guard looks a bit surprised by that and asks if that's Nade from the Dawn Guild. The man says he's disappointed that he ran away. Our hero wonders if this is the revenge Petra mentioned, but still thinks it's insane to do this in the middle of the city no matter how mad they are. The guard apologizes to the man and asks if he can inquire about the incident. The man smiles and asks what incident he means, then pushes off the ground and asks if he means this. In an instant, he reaches our hero and asks if it's about a little discipline. Nadi gets hit hard and is sent flying into a wall. The man explains that he heard that guy poisoned members of his guild and ruined the dungeon, and that he's a mere porter who hurt his guild. He adds that everyone knows what happens when someone messes with the Dawn Guild. Our hero shouts that it's a lie, then yells, explaining that it was the members of that guild who tried to kill him, begging him to believe it. People around them just watch. He grows a bit tense, thinking there's no way out and that Petra was right. The guild holds considerable influence. So in this situation, no one will take the side of a white rank like him because helping him won't benefit anyone. Then someone comments that they heard something like that, but our hero knows it's better for them to side with the Dawn Guild. People mention hearing that a porter has been deceiving adventurers, and another adds that nowadays porters act like they're the ones in charge. The guard tells Nee he understands the situation and says that in this case, he'll leave everything up to him. The man replies that he's satisfied with that. Smiling, the man asks what he thinks of all this. If he's imagined how things will be and that there's no one there who will stand by his side. Our hero asks why he's going so far, saying that he already knows the truth, that his guilt was the one in the wrong. He adds that it's all over and asks why he wants revenge now. The man says he's right and that it wasn't his fault. It's just that no one cares about low levels fighting over anything. But in the end, he still hurt his guild, and that the Dawn Guild doesn't let even small losses slide. That's how they make sure everyone who sees and remembers to be afraid. Anyone who harms the guild will pay the price. He's just a tool to make sure everyone remembers that fact. But he tells him not to worry because he's not going to kill him. He explains that he carries the medal of the last man he killed, but it'd be a waste to carry a white medal since there's no prestige in showing it off. So today he's just going to mark him so that every time people see the scar on his face, they remember the event that happened on that day. Then he activates one of his assassination skills and charges at our hero. He uses a cross-shaped slash which comes very close to hitting our hero. He thinks there's no one here who would take his side when suddenly that attack gets something. He thinks maybe that was what he believed in, but a woman appears in front of him. She orders the man to lower his weapon. She explains that he belongs to the Twilight Wind Guild and adds that at this moment, any attack on him will be considered an attack on them. Nate walks through the empty streets of the city, followed closely by his shadow. That thing asks if he's really okay with leaving things as they are, says this isn't the result his guild would have wanted, but the man explains that there weren't many choices. Facing Agnesa wasn't part of the plan. He says that even if he had handled her alone, it wouldn't have been a big deal, but someone already took on Agnesa's debt. He then adds that still, in the end, all of this left him feeling a little empty because he expected the kid to do a bit more. For a porter, he's beyond expectations, but a porter is still just a porter, just another insignificant guy. Of course, things ended abruptly, but after being hunted like that, he's probably really shaken up, and his shadow agrees. The man smiles slightly as the shadow asks what else there is, and a small cut appears on the man's face. He wonders how that happened, if it was Agnesa who landed a hit, but his shadow asks if he hasn't realized it yet, tells him to do something slowly. He should retrace his steps one by one so he can remember what happened. She tells him that from the very first moment she encountered him. Meanwhile, Nate starts to recall the attack he made while our hero dodged. Until the moment the boy pulled the weapon from his backpack, the shadow says that at the moment, Nate thought he had finished him off. That exact moment when he believed it was all over says that Nate thought the boy had completely given up. He remembers that X-shaped slash heading straight toward the kid. Then the shadow continues saying the kid did something, that he hadn't given up and had been waiting for that chance. Then our hero pulled out a hidden blade from his sleeve. Already prepared to counterattack, the shadow explains that even in that situation, he used the fact that Nade was above him and pulled a concealed weapon. In his memory, our hero remained still as the attack closed in. At that moment, he remembered that no one in the world would take a porter's side and that he had to protect himself. So in that decisive moment, the boy threw the weapon at his opponent. That strike passed right beside the man's attack and grazed the assassin's face. The shadow asks how many times she's told Need that the moment he thinks he's defeated the enemy is when he lets his guard down and becomes vulnerable. The assassin says that this time he really did drop his guard, but he seems excited and says that was interesting. He adds that maybe he'll take back what he said about feeling empty. Then he and his shadow seem satisfied with the outcome, deciding they'll go meet him again in person. Moments later, our hero puts his weapon back in his sleeve, thinking he prepared that dagger just in case he couldn't pull weapons from his backpack, but that still isn't enough to be a proper adventurer. He figures that if Agnes hadn't helped, he probably would have been in real danger. He wonders who that guy named Ned is. He questions whether the Dawn Guild really sent an adventurer of that level just for petty revenge, and honestly doesn't want to cross paths with him again. Suddenly, someone speaks to him, asking why he looks so deep in thought. Joking around, they ask if he's scared, saying that after what happened, he'll probably be haunted by those memories. The guy explains that Knight is notorious even within his own guild for being troublesome. He even controls a gang of thieves, and the guards turn a blind eye. Stone One laughs and says he'd heard a little about the guild, but didn't believe they'd stoop so low, attacking someone like that over a grudge. Agnesa says she agrees, and that's why she figured they'd be safer in a dungeon than staying in the city. That's why she led them there. Then she asks why he doesn't at least join the guild for raids, but our hero says he'd rather just stick to doing his usual porter job. Naji asks if she isn't feeling like it's getting a bit cold. He says it's the first time he's ever seen a graveyard inside a high-level dungeon. That's a rank B graveyard-type dungeon. One of the guys starts laughing and asks if he's scared and adds that dungeons like this are like a walk in the park for them. He tells him to just trust him, the Great Nines, and focus on collecting all the loot while following his lead. Our hero thinks he's not wrong because even though it's a rank B dungeon, they have gold and silver ranked adventurers and one above all of them, that being the mithril ranked woman. and having a mithril ranked member in a raid is practically overkill, but there's still a concern. In a high-level dungeon like rank B or above, it's crucial to build a balanced team to overcome the dungeon's challenges. But in their case, everyone is a warrior. And when a team leans too heavily in one direction, it's hard to handle unexpected obstacles. Then suddenly, Agnesa orders them to stop. She says it looks like they're being welcomed by the dungeon as a group of undead zombies appears in the area. Those creatures observe the group of adventurers, and without showing any concern, the woman prepares for combat. She draws her sword and takes a battle stance. She says she'll clear the path. Then, with a powerful strike, the undead start getting sliced in half. Amid the flames, she looks back as something catches her attention, and more undead rush toward her position. She strikes those creatures again and once more unleashes a fire yark in front of her. She spins her weapon, defeating all the enemies surrounding her. 2 or 3 of the monsters can't withstand the fire attack and begin to burn from it. But then from within the flames, a massive creature emerges. That giant zombie stares at the adventurer and lets out a furious roar. Our hero says that for a rank B dungeon, they're already facing mid-sized monsters right from the start, and Nines cheers the girl on. The monster picks up a huge stone block and tries to smash her with it. After that, it charges at the adventurer, but she dodges the attack once more, leaving the creature looking like a fool. In the next moment, she's already behind the monster, ready to strike. Then she activates a magical swordsman talent called Ignition. The monster just watches, unable to react as she lands her first blow. With a swift move, she hits him from behind and then unleashes a flurry of flinging attacks on the creature, which has no chance of defending itself. The monster roars, feeling all the wounds and the fire. She uses her magical swordsman skill called Blooming Flowers. In the middle of the flames, a fiery flower blooms, which then explodes, dealing massive damage in the next moment. The group just watches all that pyrotechnics. Our hero says that's mithril, and everyone watches as if they're seeing a blockbuster movie. Naji admits his concerns about the team structure were silly. He says he's seen many adventurers but never witnessed such a powerful talent before. A talent is an essential trait for an adventurer, allowing them to use special skills tied to their class. Each talent varies greatly in capability, and there's one more thing. The reason adventurers can face powerful monsters, especially at mithril rank, is because they master those talents beyond comprehension. Agnesa says there's no time for hesitation and that they need to move quickly before those things resurrect. Then she starts running ahead. Resurrection is the big difference between graveyard dungeons and other types of dungeons. The monsters in these dungeons are usually considered weak compared to dungeons of similar rank, but the difficulty lies in the fact that these creatures can resurrect no matter how many times you kill them. So the monsters you've already defeated will come back to life and relentlessly chase after the adventurers. So if your pace is too slow, you can easily end up surrounded on all sides, making your chances of clearing the dungeon very low. And that's why they usually bring a priest into the group, someone who can perform permanent eradication or use holy water, both of which are crucial but also expensive. That undead creature that had been defeated lets out a furious scream as it resurrects. 9 says the revived monsters have already caught up to them. He commenced that he told her they should have brought Puroro, and our hero asks what that's about. He explains that there's a priest in their guild who's like a permanent resident. Says she's a demon in disguise and always demands gold for anything she does. She always demands an absurd amount of gold to join expeditions, a demon disguised as a priest. He cries, asking if the guild is so poor that they can't afford someone like Puroro. Agnesa tells him to save his complaints for later. She says she'll deal with the enemies in front and asks Stone Mong to slow down the creatures coming from the rear. And to the adventurer Nines, she tells him to just stay back and watch, maybe cheer for them or something. Our hero asks if Nines isn't gonna fight, and the guy looks a little embarrassed. Then he starts talking about his weapon, saying he ended up leaving it behind. Our hero looks incredulous at that, and the guy justifies it by saying it was all rushed, so mistakes happen. Agnesa says that happens all the time and that he forgets all sorts of things, while his companion remembers the raid where he completely naughty starts laughing and says it's fine that he has a pretty large supply of weapons. He asks what kind of sword the guy prefers. Then pulling out several swords from his bag, he asks if a long sword would do since he's a knight or maybe a bastard sword. The guy is surprised by this. He quickly approaches our hero and grabs him. Headbutting him hard, he calls him an idiot. Our hero falls to the ground asking what the hell he's doing. Then Nines tells him to listen carefully that he only fights with his own sword, Elizabeth Robust. He explains that it's his vow as a knight. Our hero sits there, not really understanding, wondering what's up with this weirdo. Then suddenly Stone One calls out. He says something's off with the monsters that are following them. Points out there are fewer than expected and that they're moving really slowly. Agnesa then seems to notice something. The creatures are walking, but it's like they're stuck in glue. Looks like they have something attached to their feet. She asks if those are tacks. Smiling, her hero says it's nothing special and adds, those monsters revive anyway, right? And that the most dangerous part of this dungeon is being surrounded by resurrected monsters. They could kill them again, but that would slow progress. So he used a porter tool, a trap to keep them slowed down. He says that's why he placed those tacks along the path as they moved. He says he thought it was crude tool that wouldn't help much. The group seems surprised by that, and they say he's more useful than Nines to the warrior's despair. The group runs through the dungeon while wondering how many more times these guys are going to revive. Frustrated, Nines says that if he had his weapon, none of this would be happening. While Agnesa says now's not the time for whining because they need to escape before they're surrounded. Someone says they can see the end of the cave. She shouts the signal for Stone Mong to act, then he activates a shelter-type talent called Stone Shield. Suddenly, several rocks rise in front of him, and the creatures get trapped in them. More and more monsters approach but can't get through. He yells that it's done, but says he won't be able to keep them safe for long, so they need to get out quickly. Finally, they reach the underground zone of that dungeon. Nines questions what kind of dungeon has a huge lake blocking the path, but our hero says at least there's one thing, a raft waiting for them. So Nines mocks, saying this dungeon sure is considerate. Either way, if they want to keep going, it looks like they have no choice but to take the raft before the zombies get there. Nine says it's a trap, that the raft won't support the weight of all that heavy armor, and Agnesa tells him to take his off since he's not going to fight. Our hero says he agrees and asks him to take it off. The man looks stunned, then he tells Sir Nines and Sir Stone Mong to put their armor in there. The two men obey and remove all their armor, left only in their normal clothes. Agnesa watches the scene, then starts getting tense and yells. Red-faced, she asks how much more they're going to strip, and Nines says it's to reduce weight. Stone Monk says he's seeing this again. The next moment, the group is in the water and they continue across the lake. Suddenly, Nines starts laughing and he remembers that Agnesa let out a scream. So he mocks her, saying that even she screams. But in the next moment, his face is swollen and he has a black eye, apologizing. Then he adds that he'll make sure to wear proper clothes, and she says that as if that weren't enough. He also left his weapon behind and is now useless. He says that if he had the power of a vow, he could still pull off all that dancing around, even though she sometimes forgets his gold rank. Annoyed, she says that's exactly the problem, asking why he made a vow he can't keep. Our hero thinks about what a knight's vow is. Adventurers with the knight's talent make a vow that embodies their beliefs. This vow creates absolute rules they must follow, but in return, they gain great power. Nines made a vow that he would never fight with a weapon other than his Elizabeth Robust, and because of that, he must follow this rule. In return for this vow, Elizabeth Robust becomes an unbreakable legendary sword. The knight's vow is literally a trade-off. Our hero comments that a knight's vow isn't considered a weakness, wondering why most keep it secret. Agnesa says that's normal. That guy talks too much. There's no one in this city who doesn't know, and he says that even so, he and Elizabeth are unbeatable. But Agnesa says he always forgets. She adds that he's always an idiot, so she'll let it slide this time. She comments that she heard about that bag and that it's really amazing, asking if things disappear when you put them inside. Naughty says the weight doesn't completely disappear. The moment you put something inside, it's like powerful weight reduction magic activates. Even with 2 suits of armor, it would still feel very light. Stone Mong says that's way more impressive than Nine's sword, especially because of that turkey they ate earlier, which was delicious. He says he never imagined eating something like that in a place like this. The guy says they're right. Even Agnesa was busy munching on bread while rolling around with that zombie. The girl gets a bit embarrassed and says she didn't have a proper time to eat. She counters by saying he was just resting while she was out hunting, and he defends himself saying he put in effort, while the other asks if he's on vacation. Our hero asks them to wait a second and adds that it looks like something's about to happen. Agnesa seems to notice it too. And in the next moment, they're surrounded by multiple boats, each one packed with zombies. They all notice the enemies, and the boats begin to approach. He says that boat was a trap meant to drown adventurers, and the girl adds that fighting on a boat definitely puts them at a disadvantage. In disbelief, Nines asks if she knew it was a trap and still put them on that raft, and the girl simply confirms that, yes, she did. She says this is a dungeon. There's no way they put a raft there just to help them, and Nines is surprised it wasn't to help. Agnesa thinks that the problem is that even knowing it's a trap, there are too many enemies, and she's the only capable fighter right now. She believes that even if she went from boat to intercept them, his raft would become a pincushion for arrows before she could reach it. Then suddenly someone says to leave it to him. He explains that whatever's out there on the water is tough, so they need to be fast and get through them. She asks if he's saying that bag can help them, and our hero excitedly says yes, but adds that they need to hold on tight. Everyone in the group is surprised by this. He uses the air compression technique and then the air injection technique. In the next moment, a huge gust of wind bursts out from inside the bag, launching the raft forward with a massive boost of pressure. Agnesa asks if that's wind magic. Our hero says it's nothing fancy like magic. It's just that he compressed air inside, and now he's releasing it. He figured out that if he left the bag outside on a windy day, he could capture and store that air. Either way, when he releases it all at once, this is what happens. One of the undead creatures prepares to fire an arrow, then they begin shooting at our heroes. Naughty grips his bag tightly and speeds the raft up even more. The creatures are caught off guard by this. The girl tells him to wait a moment and asks if he's looking ahead. He explains that they blocked the entrance with a wooden barrier, concluding that those zombies set a pretty meticulous trap. Agnesa grips her weapon and says she'll clear the way through it, but our hero asks her to wait and says they have the advantage. He says he'll help too since fire and wind have good synergy. As he prepares to copy her, she thinks she understands. Our hero grabs his bag and gets ready. Then they perform a combined technique of fire and wind. That whirlwind of flames surges toward the barrier. Creatures just watch defenseless. And finally, they are struck by that powerful attack. The barrier starts to crack and catch fire, then it explodes into several pieces. Amidst the flames, some logs appear, and the group continues forward on their makeshift raft with their leader proud and satisfied with the result. Finally, they reach their destination. She asks if everyone is okay, saying they barely made it in time. She seems to assess the place and says it looks like the location where the dungeon boss must be. That is the fortress of the death zone. She says things have escalated incredibly. There's a fortress inside an underground tomb. Nine says it doesn't matter how good they are and questions whether this doesn't seem a bit too hard for a B rank dungeon, and Stone Monk says normal groups would have already failed. He continues and asks why their guild always takes dungeons like this. Couldn't they take an easy one? But the leader says this was the job they accepted. Stone Monk says their guild usually goes after dungeons that others failed to complete, but our hero says it doesn't matter to him since he's just a porter. Agnesa says that even in a B rank dungeon, they can't let their guard down since they often have problematic bosses, and it looks like the boss is finally showing up. The undead creature asks how they dare, as its eye begins to glow with energy, claiming that they entered its paradise and calling them fools. This boss is a lich-type monster. Nines asks if they're serious. There's a lich in a B rank dungeon and says that's just their luck, while his companion says it's the first time he's seen one. This type of monster belongs to the mage category, and enemies like that often come with many unpredictable factors. She thinks she's used up a lot of energy fighting alone up to now, so she draws her weapon, thinking she needs to bring him down before something unexpected happens. Then she leaps at the creature, which just watches her smiling. Most undead monsters are mindless and blindly attack their prey, but this one is still just observing because a lich is different. It's a creature that seeks knowledge even after death. And in that moment, it was analyzing Agnesa and quickly realized she made a frontal deliberate attack to protect her allies behind her. She then struck him with fire, and in that moment he found his answer. The girl was surprised as the creature vanished and something began to materialize above them. The elite lich is now floating, appearing above them. He calls the group foolish creatures and using his power, commands them to become his servants. Agnesa shouts for them to get out of the way. Then that crimson energy spreads. Our hero can't believe what he's seen. And before him, energy and chains spread across the room, forming a powerful magical attack, while he thinks they might be facing the worst-case scenario in this dungeon. Suddenly, Agnesa stops, and she starts to smile strangely. Our hero realizes she just became an enemy. Nines tells Stone Monk to grab Nagi and run, but his companion asks what he's going to do. Because no matter how strong he is, he can't stop Agnesa and says they should just flee. But Nines doesn't seem to agree. Charging toward his opponents, Nines asks what he's talking about. And with an excited expression, he says that a knight never turns his back on an enemy. He has to admit that does sound pretty badass. He says no matter how strong Agnesa is, she already burned through a lot of her power, and that flame of hers is dying down. Adds that it's no surprise she handled almost the entire dungeon alone, and he could say it was all part of his plan, the great plan of Nines. And that, at this point, he could take her on even bare-handed. The woman starts preparing for combat and channels her energy into her sword. Nines stands in the middle of the hall, ready for the fight. He also begins to focus for it. But in the next moment, it seems things aren't going quite as he planned. Agnesa charges at him and delivers a powerful flaming strike. He gets hit head-on thinking, what the hell was that? And questions how she still has so much power as she prepares for another attack, which barely misses this time. He keeps dodging as best he can, and the girl doesn't give him a single moment to think. He tells himself that a gentleman never retreats and keeps repeating that mantra to himself. Then, in the next moment, he activates an unlikely knight talent called Retreat. The other members of the group begin making their way back, running to get away from the girl, when suddenly Nines appears asking them to wait for him. Our hero says he thought Nines would fight her, and the man replies that he was joking, asking how he could possibly think he would handle Agnesa. Stonemong says he wasn't expecting much from him anyway, since he already turned his back on a bunch of undead, and it's just the same excuse again about not having his weapon. Our hero draws the group's attention and asks them to look over there. At the edge of the water, some boats arrive, and he says all the undead just showed up. He adds that they're completely surrounded. Stone Monk thinks there are too many of them, while Naughty says this is bad. Outside, there are tons of undead, and while glancing back, he comments about the inside, adding that there's also Agnesa. Stone Monk steps forward and says he'll try to buy them some time. Then he uses a talent to create a powerful shield, and all the surrounding rocks begin to rise from the ground. He starts using his rock barrier talent on Agnesa. The girl just watches without any expression and notices the approaching rock. She quickly jumps from where she was and starts using the very rocks to boost her movement. She leaps across all the rocks following her path. Stone One thinks that's exactly what he expected Agnesa would do and that she's too fast. He can't land a hit. Our hero is impressed by all that. He thinks there must be something just for a brief moment that can stop Agnesa in her tracks, but he knows it has to be something good because a half-baked trick won't work on her. So he reaches into his bag and comes up with an idea, and throwing something at the girl, he thinks maybe this will work. That thing flies past her without hitting, but somehow catches her attention as our hero activates his secret porter technique, a skill called fetch and grab. Then Agnesa starts jumping after the item that looks like a delicious little pastry. She stops for a moment, satisfied, savoring the treat. Naughty said he had a hunch that even under mental control, she would still act on her most basic instincts. Nines can't believe what he's seeing, but he adds that he knows they won't be able to keep her still for long. So he shouts for everyone to find a place to hide inside the fortress. Sometime later, he's completely out of breath and comments that it looks like she's not chasing them for now. Meanwhile, the rest of the undead are climbing the hills and are trying to regroup outside the fortress. Naughty says they need to make a plan, but Ninth says it won't be easy. He says Agnesa is being aided by that lich. He comments that she should have been nearly out of ether after clearing the dungeon, but since she was fed with the lich's magic, her flames came back. He says that if it weren't for that, he could have taken her down by himself. And Stone Monk says, yeah, sure. Then Nine says, anyway, what is this place? But our hero says he doesn't know. He says that judging by all the weapons displayed, it looks like some kind of armory. But Nagi says these aren't weapons undead would use, so he thinks it's something else, and that this place looks more like a trophy room. Nines and Stoneman are surprised by this information. He explains that intelligent monsters like glitches sometimes collect the belongings of fallen adventurers as trophies, which probably explains all this. Nagi thinks that the structure of this dungeon is pretty challenging for its level. With a lich as the boss, it's no surprise that many raid groups have failed here. But there's something he still doesn't understand. Why there are children's toys and objects clearly not belonging to adventurers scattered around. Stonemong says he once heard a story. And as he mentioned before, they usually take on dungeons that others avoid. And when this dungeon first appeared, it became notorious for repeated failures. But strangely after that, people from nearby villages started disappearing. He goes on to say that they didn't notice anything unusual while exploring this dungeon. But then there's this. Our hero is surprised and says, a kidnapping dungeon? Then he asks what his companion means. If he's saying the monsters leave the dungeon and kidnap civilians, Nines becomes furious just thinking about the abductions, then says the dungeon hasn't broken yet and questions whether the monsters aren't supposed to be trapped inside. Our hero says it's just a theory since kidnapping-type dungeons are incredibly rare. Normally, monsters in a dungeon can't leave their area, and there's a theory that monsters outside the dungeon's barrier lose their strength. So only through a dungeon break can monsters leave their dungeons. He says that, in this case, there's only one way to confirm it. They need to take down that damn lich and see for themselves. He adds that there's no other choice. He's going to do it, and he's going to kill the lich because a knight cannot stand idly by in the face of injustice. Our hero asks why Stone Mong is looking at him like that, but the guy says it's nothing. Then Nines picks something up and says it's time. He ties that cloth around his head and says that from this moment on, he will deceive the knight's oath and draw a sword. Naughty says that could have serious consequences and asks if he's sure about it. And the guy explains that it's more like a personal vow, not a magical force, so he can trick it. He says he's never tried it before, but he'll give it everything he's got. And that if he can land even one hit, it might break the mind control on Agniesa. Stone Mong asks how they're supposed to get him in front of the lich, and Nine says that's his job and asks if he thinks breaking a knight's oath is easy. Naughty asks if he really can do it and asks if, assuming they can get him to the lich, could he take him down? But Naughty says that's the wrong question. He adds that if his theory is correct, it's not about whether they can do it. It's about something they must do. Our hero says he agrees and that he'll act as his eyes and lead him to the boss. Stone Mong asks how they plan to do that considering you're already up against an army. He explains that to reach the elite they'll have to get through Agniesa first and also through the entire army. Our hero says he's right as he picks up a weapon and that if they want to get through the army, they'll need an army too. Meanwhile, in the lich's chamber, one of those creatures lets out a guttural sound and another one seems to communicate. Then the lich says it looks like the rats have come up with a plan. He gives the command to capture them all and says they can chop off a limb or two if they need to. Those creatures rush forward in a frenzy, and our hero says they're coming. He tells everyone else to stay behind him. Suddenly, one of the undead seems to trigger a trap and a massive explosion erupts in the room. While our hero uses his bag to obscure the area with smoke. Nine says he can smell something delicious, and Stone Monk tells him to hold his breath while our hero calls out for gluttony. The little creature asks if he's sure this is going to work, and the porter tells him not to worry, that he'll handle the aim. He explains that gluttony just needs to pull the trigger. Then in the middle of all that smoke, a cadaverous figure appears. The undead creature looks surprised by what it sees. Our hero holds his bag in front of them. Inside, a bright light can be seen, and also a cute little creature holding a crossbow. Suddenly, an army of those little creatures appears, all holding crossbows. Gluttony shouts for everyone that it's time to earn their keep, then gives the order to fire as dozens of arrows fly forward. Our hero uses a porter's secret technique called dogling gun, and from inside the bag, several bolts are launched. A hail of projectiles begins hitting the creatures. Nines asks what the hell is going on while Stone Mong says it's awesome. That whole army of monsters starts getting wiped out. Our hero looks very pleased with the result and adds that they've made it straight to the boss room. Elsewhere in a large city, the late afternoon sun falls on that massive building. This is the Adventurers Guild, and its staff work tirelessly. A girl asks Petra what she's been writing so much lately. She adds that Petra's been acting strange ever since she returned from that rift dungeon and asks if she's writing some kind of research or something like that. But Petra laughs and says it's nothing. She just has a few questions on her mind and is organizing them. Her friend asks questions, then she says she's been wondering if you really need a combat-related talent to become an adventurer, and the girl asks what kind of obvious question is that. She replies that, of course, you do. If you don't have a combat talent, you can't be an adventurer because people only become one if they have it. But Petra says she doesn't need to explain that and tells her to just look over there. Someone is shouting, telling them not to mock him, then it shows that his talent is sewing. The furious young man yells that there's no way that could be his talent and that he wants to take the test again. With tears in his eyes, he says he has to become an adventurer. The girl says she sees boys like that several times a day and that the chances of awakening a talent fit for adventuring are incredibly low. The path each person must follow in life is determined very early on. Everyone goes through a job change ceremony conducted by the guild where their innate talent is awakened. This process analyzes the ether and their bodies and displays their talent in written form on a magical device. As a result, the rules for becoming an adventurer became extremely strict. So there are people who say that it's better to discover your natural talent as early as possible, so you can begin perfecting it from then on. She admits she's inclined to think that way too. However, there's one thing she still doesn't understand: why people get so desperate to become adventurers. Even with the chance to gain fortune and status, it remains a very dangerous path. The girl says that considering that they're doing pretty well. After all, they've got a job that pays like a mid-tier adventurer's salary without any risk. And also, after what happened and after meeting Nagi, she started questioning a few things about a person's future. Whether their dreams are really determined by the talent they're born with, some undead charge in fury, but they keep getting struck by several arrows. Our hero keeps pointing his bag at them. They advance while Natty tells everyone to stay close and says they might have outnumbered them. He explains that each of those arrows was crudely made, so the creatures will recover soon and start chasing them again. Nine's asked if they're doing okay and says he can't see anything, so he has no idea what's going on. And Stone Mong says not to worry. Nadi's great. He says he heard that Naji led a rift dungeon, and that's no exaggeration. Our hero says they're almost at the boss room, and that's when the real game begins. Inside that room is the Lich and an army of undead. Stone Mong says he expected a lot, but with this many enemies, it'll be hard to reach the boss. But Nagi tells him not to worry. He has a plan. Nine says he should remember that the Lich dodged Agnes' attack with a blink and that they need to try a surprise attack to take it down quickly. Then Nine says it's fine. He'll take it down with a single hit, and our hero tells him to stop talking so loud. Otherwise, the enemies will hear them. The guy apologizes, saying he didn't realize they were that close, and Nagi says they'll have to start now because there's no other choice. To reach the Lich, they'll need to get past the undead soldiers blocking the way, but they don't need to fight them all. And they don't need to take them head on either, our hero thinks as he points a crossbow with a mushroom attached. He fires that mushroom at another target. Looks like he was aiming for that huge chandelier and hits it dead on, thinking all they need to do is get out of the monster's line of sight. He knows that undead creatures by nature rely more on their sense of smell than vision. And according to the renowned book of the undead called Dead Walking, there was a man who took advantage of that by covering himself with the remains of undead corpses, but they don't have any corpses to use. However, fortunately, his bag managed something. It's been absorbing the smell of this place the whole time. Nines asks what the hell that stench is, and our hero tells him to just endure it for a bit, because with this stink, the monsters won't be able to recognize them. He explains that they are steadily getting closer to the Lich. The undead seem confused. They walk back and forth without much reaction. Stoneman walks among them pretending to be a zombie, saying for them to move aside because he's a hungry zombie. The group manages to sneak forward through the middle of that army. The Lich watches from afar, questioning if they're trying to pull off a cheap trick like filthy rats. Then, pointing a finger and channeling his power, he asks if the adventurers really thought such filthy tricks would work on him. He then casts a fire magic attack. The horde of undead simply watches the powerful spell. All the boss questions where those rats are hiding. Then suddenly someone yells, "No." Someone punches a rock hard, and from above the undead, we see a massive boulder rising. From the top of it, our hero shouts to Nines that the Lich is just ahead. And from up there, they can see the creature sitting on its throne. Nines excited says, "You lovely little things, you really did it." Our hero yells that Agniesa is there and says he'll use food to get her attention. Nine says he only needs one strike on that thing, and Nagi says he got it. He grips his sword tightly, shouting that he's going to end this with a single blow. The Lich just looks at him with disdain while beginning to cast his magic, but Nines yells that he's not getting away. While the creature used his teleportation magic, Nines struck with force, saying he'll cut him down right there. But in the next moment, he's hit by a shoe. Not understanding what just happened, he's sent flying. His companions are also shocked, and our hero questions why she didn't eat the sweets. Then he tenses, thinking it can't be. Looking at the girl, he thinks he knows what happened. Wondering if she's already full, Stone Monk says she's eaten way too much already. Then our hero tells Nines that it's not too late to try again. The knight then shouts and charges once more, when suddenly an entity appears saying that Knight Nines broke his oath and disgraced his honor, and that she will now deliver his punishment. Our hero yells something about Nines' knightly oath and tells him to dodge because the undead are rushing toward him. Stone Mong says he'll hold them off for a while. He uses his protection talent, Rockwall. The creatures try to break through his stone barrier in vain. And with that, the group bought some more time. Stonemong says he can't hold it for more than 5 minutes, explains that his ether is running out and they need a plan. The girl says to Petra that there are people without talent who still want to become adventurers, and that maybe with rigorous training they could match one. But the decisive difference between an adventurer and a non-adventurer is ether. Only with these combat talents can you accumulate and refine ether in your body. Of course, a low-level dungeon could be cleared by a well-trained common person, but against high-level monsters or the inevitable boss that awaits in every dungeon. Without ether, they simply can't be defeated. Our hero grabs his bag once again determined, and several arrows fall to the ground while in that conversation someone asks if any of them could become an adventurer. The Lich simply smiles, waiting for the attack. A massive explosion.
Alright, that's the end of the story. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.